Okay, so this next segment is going to be about the 5 rhetorical devices. So there are so many rhetorical devices out there. You're going to learn about many, many more, especially if you're taking AP English next year. But there are 5 devices that I'm responsible for teaching this year, refreshing your memory on some because I think some will be familiar, and to have you practice finding them in speeches and even writing them in your own work. So, just a quick recap, and I will also be including a link to a resource that will have further examples of these things. So, the first one is illusion. So, in a speech, let's just talk about a speech for today, since that's the piece that you'll be reading. There may be references to famous people, places, events, works of literature. Biblical allusions are big, classical allusions are big, Shakespeare allusions are big in writing or in speeches. So it's a well known a reference to a well known event or person or piece of literature or film. So it's not a direct reference, it's alluded to, it is hinted at. So if I said, that there's no place like home, if I quoted that, there's no place like home, that's an allusion to the Wizard of Oz. Now, if I said, just like in the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy said, there's no place like home, that's not an allusion. That's just a quote, a direct reference. So this should be indirect. And a good way to remember the difference is that allusions oftentimes leave people out. So for some of you, if I did say, there's no place like home, you would not get that that came from the Wizard of Oz. And the same thing happens, to me as a person who's older than you. You guys mention things from TV shows, from movies, from memes, from YouTubers that I just don't get. They go right over my head because that allusion, that reference is something that I'm unfamiliar with. Okay, so look, in the speeches, in the letters, look for subtle hints or indirect references to famous people, places, events, works of literature. A metaphor, at this point, you should know what metaphors are, but it's comparing two unlike things without using like or as. So it could be an extended metaphor that goes on for a couple of sentences, but it's an example of figurative language. It's not saying exactly what you mean. To say that the girl is a mouse, we don't really mean she's a mouse. We probably mean she's quiet, she's small, she's timid. So instead of just saying she is quiet, we would say the girl is a mouse, and that captures this whole array of traits about mice that we could be talking about with her. Okay, or she or he is such a pig, right? To say that someone is a pig, we don't really mean that they're a pig. We might mean that they eat a lot, that they're messy, or something like that. So be aware that metaphors will be used frequently as a rhetorical device. Again, these devices help us to achieve our appeals. So you use the 5 devices to create logos. You use the 5 devices to create pathos or ethos, okay? The next one is repetition. That's simply intentionally repeating single words or phrases in a speech or a letter. Okay, so not just, having the word the or a or I or something like that, but really intentional repetition, repeating. Okay. I'm actually going to skip down to parallelism because parallelism and repetition go hand in hand. So parallelism, I know we've talked about this in class before, but in case you don't remember or you missed it, it's a repeated series, like structure, repeated grammatical structure. So yes, in Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, he uses actual repetition, repeated phrases of I have a dream. Those words are the exact same, right? I have a dream that. However, after he says I have a dream that, the next part is different. I have a dream that one day this will happen. I have a dream that one day that will happen. So those are parallel to each other. They're parallel sentences. They have similar grammatical structures with some repetition in them. Another example of repetition might be, and I think I shared this example with your classes before as well, another Martin Luther King quote: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we see that there's a balance. There's a repeated structure of justice and injustice anywhere and everywhere. There's just balance. Think about balance and patterns. That would be parallelism. And finally, we have rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions are simply questions that are not asked in order to evoke an answer. Some people mistakenly define them as questions without an answer. That's not the definition. Many of these questions could have answers, but they're not asked to evoke an answer. So if someone says, "What's wrong with you?" they don't want you to list all the things that are wrong with you. They are asking that rhetorical question because they want you to sense that they feel that there is something wrong with you or that you've done something bad. Also, parents love this one. Does this look clean to you? Okay, you should certainly, at that point, probably not say, "Yeah, it looks good," or there will be, a conflict. Asking, "Does this look clean to you?" is a parent's way or someone's way of saying, "This isn't clean." So the question is asked to evoke, a certain thought in the listener's mind, but it is not asked so that the listener would answer the question aloud, especially if a speech is given. But they would maybe process the question, they would ponder it, and hopefully they will think of an answer that is similar to the one that the speaker wants them to think. Okay, so in a speech, you have to be very careful using rhetorical questions because you want to ask them in a way that your audience will think what you want them to think. You don't want to ask a question that will actually make them think in a way that is counter to what you want them to think. So an example might be, don't you just think it would be great to wear school uniforms? Okay, for some people, yeah, they might think that's great. For others, they won't think that's great. So you just have to be very careful with, as a writer, how you use rhetorical questions. So these will be important as you're looking at FDR speech and other speeches in the rest of this unit. Please feel free to reach out with any questions through Remind, through It's Learning, or through email. Thank you, and I'll sort of be seeing you guys, I hope, soon. I miss you all. I hope you all are safe and healthy, and we're all just trying to get through this together. So all right, bye bye.